Hi, welcome to this ManagerQ Sprint 130 review, Sprint February 17th. Next slide, please. Just showing blank on mine.
Yeah. What happened? Great.
There we go.
Okay, we'll go with the slide. We had the gap between open and merged PRs is about the same as recently. I think we're seeing a new level here in that 200 range. Time will tell as we go forward if this is our new the new rate that we're seeing. Next slide, please. And again, enhancements outran bug fixes this last sprint, which is kind of normal. With a nice mix of everything else above that. So about 50-50 roughly bug fixes to enhancements. Next slide, please. Next slide, okay. Off to her for user interface.
What happened there?
You're missing a slide.
Dennis.
Yep.
Hold on. All right.
Oh,
There we go.
there we go. I saw it earlier. The only one that stood out was the Manager Writer Classic in the other issues, and follow up and see what may have been going on there. Other than that, it's pretty normal, pretty static. Now the next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. Total of 38 PRs merged across UI and API repos. That includes 8 enhancements, 9 bug fixes, and 16 technical debt, and so on. For the bug fixes in this sprint, fix was made on workers screen to display and save values of refresh and CAPNU data collector workers, memory threshold, and worker counts. On infrastructure provider dashboard, a fix was made to show missing titles on line charts when the charts were empty. An issue was fixed to redirect user back to correct screen after performing certain actions on list of host aggregates when viewing the list through relationships. Fix was made to send validation dependencies when validating credentials. This fixes an issue where if you change a field from validation dependencies, the form still was showing as valid. So that got fixed. In service UI, code expected the href to always be there when building help menu documentation links. So this caused cannot read property JS error. So that got fixed. And on the API side, a minor params name bug was addressed by renaming zone parameter to zone_name. And also ability to pause, resume a container provider was removed from API. This had been removed from UI, but was still accessible via API. And on the enhancement side, a new field detail description was added to group edit form and details view screen. A change was made on the provider validation component to only send the fields from the component that is being validated plus any specified dependencies instead of sending multiple component fields to prevent any confusion. A new data-driven form component async provider credentials has been added. That's a wrapper around async credentials with a preset validation function that in the future will validate the credentials using the API. A change was made to the logic that updates server's zone in case the zone is not modifiable. Zone field is disabled in the UI with a message to let user know why the box is disabled. Cypress support was added for integration tests. And on the API side, existing provider creation method is extended to support data submitted from a data-driven form. Code looks for a DDF attribute. If that is set, it uses new creation method. Otherwise, it just executes the legacy code. And that's all I have for the UI. Over to Adam for providers.
Thanks, Harpreet. So this sprint, Keenan simplified the CAPNU queuing logic around how the priorities are set for the queue. Before it was looking at a bunch of kind of not easy to tell what was going on attributes of the queue items, and here we figured out what the priority should be, and it's a lot easier to read now instead of it kind of being implicit. Added a queue name for EMS operations for all the classes which are being used by Automate. So Automate previously had been using like my zone, my server, that kind of stuff. Not all the classes that were being used from Automate had those defined, so they would have failed. So now those are all defined for all the Automate methods that are being used. David fixed some issues with nested DDF schemas, checking for encrypted passwords. Before, it was more of a flat schema, and so it was simpler to find the password field. Now that there are some changes to the DDF schemas, they're actually nested, and so we had to traverse that to pick out the password field to make sure it's encrypted before being put on the queue. We also fixed a bug where records that were being currently refreshed while a child EMS is being deleted were left orphaned. So there's sort of a continuation of a bug where we had before, where when you deleted a provider, if there was a refresh currently running, all of those records didn't get cascade deleted because they were currently being created. Same problem, but in this case it was for a child EMS. So a network manager of a cloud manager had the same problem. So the fix is just kill all of the workers for the child EMS before issuing the destroy call. On the pluggability front, we removed some provider classes that were in serialized YAML columns in EMS event, full data column. There were two sets. For VMware, there were a bunch of Vim types like Vim hash and Vim string. And for overt rev, there was the overt SDK4. So we got those cleared out so that there are no longer any provider specific classes in the full data column. We also refactored VM migrate tasks to not send VMware classes from core. So the VMware provider exposed an API that took some VMware classes instead of just whether it was thin or thick, which is really all it cared about. So we changed that so that now from core, it just passes thin or thick down to that API. That also makes it easier for other providers to implement this method without having to deal with those provider classes. And we also moved some specs out of core, which were testing serialization of Vim hash and Vim array. So that's moved down into the VMware provider now. And next slide. On the DDF front, David went through and updated the schemas to match the current UI a little bit better. So he had some nice side-by-side screenshots which showed the current UI and the DDF schema-based UI, and so he updated the schemas in those three cloud providers to better match what the current UI looks like, and it's looking pretty good. For the Amazon provider, we added a method to create the provider based on the provided DDF schema. So for a while, we've been able to verify credentials with that schema, but the next step is obviously to take those parameters and create the provider with it. So the Amazon provider is the first one that has the ability to create based on those DDF schemas, and we'll go through and add it to the rest of the providers from there. LJ also added or removed a top-level require on Amazon SSA support and moved it to where it's actually being used. This reduced, I think he said, 10 to 40 megs of memory usage and 512 files, and actually a non-trivial amount of time from startup. So that was awesome. For the Ansible Tower client, we allow request options to now be passed down. So Faraday allows you to control some lower level options on the socket. Open timeout was one that we were particularly interested in, but there was no way to pass those options down to Faraday through the top level connection. So we now allow you to pass in request options that'll be passed down to Faraday. Smart State had a nice enhancement to collect the install date for Windows packages. That was a nice little enhancement. And on VMware, we added the ability to resize disks through a top-level expose method. So some community users were using reconfigure VM directly to be able to resize the disks, and so we now give them a proper API method to call instead of having to do that directly. And that's it for providers. Next slide.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning. We had 10 PRs merged this sprint. Drew fixed an issue where service dialogues auto-generated from Ansible Tower job template survey information was missing default values for the dynamic, read-only, and reconfigurable settings, which caused odd behavior in the service dialogue. Lucy made a Hammer-specific PR for a retirement error log message change made last sprint. Drew added a schema migration to remove the Red Hat domain. Previously, we merged the Red Hat domain contents into the ManageIQ domain. This schema migration will move the Red Hat domain if it exists, which is important because Red Hat domain is a system domain. There's no way to delete it through the UI. Greg continued his refactoring work with the creation of another PR to resolve more Rubocop errors. That's it for Automate. Next slide, over to Joe.
Okay, this is not Joe, it's Greg T. And back by popular demand. No. So on the platform space, There were 20 PRs merged across multiple repos. Adam contributed an enhancement to avoid looping through EMSs, getting the counts of VMs and hosts. So that's a performance improvement. He also added a migration to remove Vim types from events full data column. So to avoid workers having to load all those classes on startup or at all. Nick C made a couple of enhancements. So he is using the server zone to determine the node selector when running in pods, and that effectively adds support for zones in pods, and he's going to show you some of that in the live demo coming up. And he also made a change to base the config map generator container and HTTPD containers on the UBI, the universal base image. That's to fix some issues for running with cryo in pods. Seth Prayer contributed an enhancement for our build environment to add pure little endian mode at PowerPC. That's on the pod side. Nick L contributed an enhancement to Awesome Spawn that allows you to stream together standard out and standard error. It's pretty cool. He also enhanced the MIQ bot to autocorrect and provide suggestions when labels are incorrectly entered, which is pretty cool. It has like a did you mean thing on it, just like Ruby has. Dan enhanced more core extensions process support to include pause, resume, and alive methods. He also bumped the sysprog table gem to version 1.2x. Satoe updated the appliance build to clean up container images after they've been pushed to the registry. And a community member, Anton Reeder, he added Ruby 2.6 and 2.7 to continuous integration for Optimus. Next slide, please. So for bugs, Adam fixed a bug in the cross repo testing where when you're overriding a gem repo and the gem name didn't match the repo name, it wouldn't work properly. And Nick Carboni fixed a bug in the smart proxy worker. It was failing to start. It was a race condition, timing thing, and a constant problem. Loading constant. The do work thread was loading the constants before the loading classes before the main thread was loading them. So he waited for he waited to start that work loop before after the main thread loaded. Sorry. I didn't think I'd stumble on that one.
It's a race condition.
Yeah, it's a race condition.
It's a deadlock.
So another bug. This has been an issue that's popped up from time to time with replication on a subscriptions tab where there could be multiple cases where you can't reach the remote host, and it takes a long time for that to time out, and it would fail with a proxy error on HTTP because the request would time out, and it's a pretty ugly page. So he actually added a timeout there when we go out there, and I forget how long is it? Is it 10 seconds, 5 seconds maybe? Something small, something reasonable, so that we can get on to the next subscription. Nick L fixed a bug in performance reports when you had it was an error message with polymorphic association that was addressed. And then lastly, for bugs, Satoe bumped down the version of virtual environment to 16.7.9. There's an incompatibility with 20.0 version that we're using in the build environment. And Keenan made a couple of fixes for technical debt, where he deleted some code to simplify how storage is linked to EMS. And that's it. And I'll turn it over to Nick so he can do a demo of some of the pod work he's been doing.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't put a slide in. Sorry about that. I'm just going to grab my screen.
Grab the screen share.
Okay. So this is what the app looks like deployed in OpenGIF. Some changes from maybe previous demos I've done on this specifically. On the face of it, we're labeling each of these with a number before them. That's the server ID. And if you've heard me talking much at stand-up over the last few months, I guess, some of the work I've been doing has been making sure that we can run multiple servers, at least as an abstraction, in OpenShift. So these are the workers that belong to server ID 1. If you had multiple regions, they'd be prefixed with the compressed ID. That doesn't matter. So we have a VMware provider also. That's running in our default zone, right? And that's all sorted out here. So the issue that we're trying to solve here is that, show you. So here you can see that the VMware provider workers are running on 2 different nodes. And in particular, one of them is the infra and master node. The other one is just a compute node. So I'd really like my provider workers to only be running in my compute node. Maybe my compute node is also on the same rack as my vCenter server or something along those lines. And that's a problem that we just didn't really have a solution for in the container architecture up until now. If you're running in VMs, you would put your VM near your other VMs and things would work properly, but that's not really the way that containers operate, specifically with OpenShift and Kubernetes. So we're going to use the existing way that ManageIQ has to do this placement, which is zones. Specifically, we're allowing a new zone to be created, provider zone. And since there's no server placement explicitly in pods, right, that's something that happens outside of the app when you're running in a VM, we auto-create a new server when you create a zone, and this is so that you can continue doing your roles, you can change your worker counts, not fetch the data, good. Yep. Anyway, so this is what monitoring another server looks like in OpenShift. So here we have our new set of pods, which aren't deploying. This is intentional. This is because of how the node selectors work. So in particular, if we take this pod, and look at the node selector, we have ManageIQ zone provider equals true. Right, so that's saying that this pod should be scheduled on nodes that have this label. Right, so this is something that as an administrator, you would, go ahead and do. OC edit your node, my compute node. All right, and add a label that looks like /zone provider through. All right, edited. Let me pop back over here. And containers start pulling. All right, so things are scheduled properly. And our containers will start deploying. So that's great. I can run a bunch of stuff on another node, right? But how does that have anything to do with providers? So if you pop into the providers screen, you now can go ahead and edit this one and move the provider to our new zone. And the same as you would expect on an appliance, the provider workers are gone from server 1 and are spun up on server 2. And so ends my demo.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Fantastic. And if there wasn't at least one little glitch there, then we wouldn't believe it was live. Too.
It's a nice touch, right?
Yes.
Very well
yes. Yeah. Awesome. Well executed.
All right. So stop sharing my screen.
I guess it's my turn. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great. So a quick update from the QE side. We have seen the same trend that you have seen in the Manage IQ repos as our number of submitted PRs and merged PRs has gone down. That being said, congrats to Yaroslav Henner as a first level reviewer. Well done, Yaroslav, in all the reviewing and automation contributions you've been making. So now we'll be seeing some more reviews and approvals from Yaroslav. This sprint, he also modified the log collector PyTest hooks. So they will now fetch logs from temporary appliances deployed during test, in addition to collecting the logs at the end of the PyTest session from the appliances that were deployed for the duration. Matos has automated tests for EC2 provider configuration when adding multiple EC2 providers and for validating the available regions. Tasos has automated and parameterized the zone testing, and Parthvi has automated tests for time zone settings in reports, inclusion of the VM created time field in those reports. She also modeled the automate requests pages and automated the REST tests related to scheduling automate requests. And that is it from QE. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And that ends the Sprint 130 review. The next sprint will be on March 4th, Sprint 131. So we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Thanks for the demo, Nick.
Yep. Thanks.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks,
You
Mike.
too.